Yeah! Welcome back to Calling All Beings Sunday Morning Edition. I'm your host, DJ, along with the brothers, Money Nathan, and the man himself from the UK, Frank. And we are here to bring you a Sunday morning edition of none other than our very special guest, Graeme Rendall. We're going to get to him in a second, but Nathan, despite my difficulty sleeping last night, how are you this morning, sir? Co-conspirator.
Wide awake now, thank you. A little coffee here. Really excited to talk to Graeme. It's been a while since we've had him on the show.
Yep.
We're huge fans of Graeme. The guy is incredible, and we're lucky to have him on. And also lucky to have Frank. Frank, it's good to see you again and to catch up with you. This is going to be a great morning show. So, I mean, happy Sunday, everybody.
And joining us again, thankfully, he's got some time in this very busy schedule he's got going on. The host, right? The host of UFO Thinker podcast, Frank, part of the CAB Podcast Network. My man Frank, what's up, brother?
Yeah, doing pretty good, mate. Pretty good. As you said, it's been a hectic couple of months, really. I mean, yeah, my life outside of the UFO stuff's been a bit on the busy side, but I'm a bit more relaxed now, and I've got a little bit more time, so it's great to be back. And I've got my hay fever has kicked in this morning with a passion. It's that time of year for me. I'm not exactly sure. I always look into this each year.
We'll hit the snooze.
But whatever,
he froze, but he's back. There you go.
Oh, I'm back. Yeah. So I was just saying, whatever pollen it is that I'm allergic to is now in abundance in the atmosphere around my house. So I might sneeze a few times today. I'll try and mute myself if I do. But other than that, I'm doing pretty good.
I think that adds something to the show. I really like that. You know that.
It's organic.
Yeah, it's something cool.
It's authentic.
It is. All right. We got a couple people in the chat. First of all, I want to say hello to Julie. Good morning, Julie. Thanks for being here early. Gerald Greenwood is here. Mick Ashworth was first up in the joint before any of us came on. Mick was already here. Man, I'll tell you what, guys. I put it on the cab chat, but Mick has some amazing experiences with speaking, using that spirit box and contacting spirits who are in turn having other conversations with other spirits while he's on. It is amazing. And look at that, Ryan Sprague in the joint. What's up, gangster? All right. Awesome. In the house. All right. So our guest of honor this morning, basically Nathan said to me, we got to get Graeme back on. I'm like, yeah, man, it's been time. We got to get Graeme on, see what the hell's on his mind. We're going to see Frank wild out a little bit about NASA and Sean Kirkpatrick. So, without further ado, this brother right here is the author. He just told us of 14.
Uh-oh, I lost your audio, DJ. Was it just me, or did everybody else?
No, he dropped out. Okay. Hello, everybody.
Well, he's the author of 14 books, 4 on UFOs, UFOs before Roswell, Dawn of the Flying Saucers, Flying Saucer Fever, Intercept and Identify. That's the most recent one, covering aerial UFO encounters from 1953 to 1954. The Honorable, the Venerable, Graeme Rendall. Welcome, sir.
Hello there. I'm not wearing this for a bet, don't worry. I'm actually in the middle of rehearsals for my wife's play, so I just happen to be playing a mayor who is wearing a black triangle hat.
Incredible.
So
we're going to get into some black triangles. And you haven't, if I'm correct here, I don't think you've covered those specifically yet in your books, but I have a feeling, maybe a hunch, that they're coming.
Well, you say that. I have actually, there's a brief reference to them in the Foo Fighters book. So there was a Spitfire pilot over Northumberland in England, encountered 4 at something like 22,000 feet in January 1944, I think it was. So that's still something I'm trying to chase down some more details about. But that's the only reference so far. Yeah, triangles don't really enter into it in terms of airborne sightings until much later.
Amazing. Now, Graeme, for those of the folks who are listening who aren't as familiar with what your work, how often you're writing these books, you mentioned before we started the show, you're always writing, you love writing. What is kind of the cadence for you? And I mean, you're releasing these books on, I feel like every 6 months ish or so. What do you have a roadmap that you have a trajectory here? What do we look forward to?
To be honest, Nathan, they just get released when they're done. There's no sense hanging on to them or for any longer. I mean, I just want them to be out there so people can appreciate them, really. And it's what I do. So, as I mentioned to you before, we started, I've always loved writing. I used to write magazine articles before I started writing books, and I would just write for pleasure anyway. So writing is not a chore. It's not something I sort of dread. I don't really get writer's block. I did have a period of time after I had a concussion back in about 2016 or so, when I kind of lost that kind of mojo and I couldn't write for a little while until, my head became descrambled or whatever it was. So I had a bit of time when I couldn't really write anything, but thankfully that's in the past now. So yeah, I get up in the morning. If I'm not doing anything else, then 7 o'clock, I'm sitting at a desk in the house with a cup of coffee and I'm just writing. And then other times, I've got a spare hour and out and about, I'll find a coffee shop somewhere, and I'll just, I have the laptop with me wherever I go. So if I'm on a train or whatever, then it's a perfect place to write, and I don't need quiet. I can sit in the middle of a busy coffee shop or in the middle of a busy railway carriage, and I'm totally fine about writing. I can just zone in on what I'm doing. So yeah, that's pretty much what I do. So yes, the books might come out quite quickly, but actually this series that I've gone into now, which is this these kind of aerial kind of encounters books, like certain years, they almost write themselves to a certain point. That it's a formula now that seems to be tried and tested. This is like the third one now, Intercept and Identify. So they're not easy to write. That's probably too. I can't really say that, but they're not difficult. There's something I can just I can not churn out either. That's the wrong phrase. But it's not just a case of having to think, what do I go right now?
Wait, so you're saying there's a lot of material in the historical record about UFOs that you're not just making this stuff up? Is that what you're saying?
No, but also it's stuff that is out there but never featured in books that certainly I read in the 70s and 80s, and they covered a lot of things. So you'd get books that had sighting after sighting after sighting, but you were lucky if you got like 2 or 3 lines about each one or a paragraph or 2 about each one. But there very, very little detail beyond that. And I used to be, I might be like you, I don't know, but I used to scratch my head and think, I want to know more about this case. I want to know, the what and the where and the back end of everything. So these cases, a lot of them I've just never seen them anywhere in print before. But the intelligence files are there, and it's just a question of digging them up and looking through them and basically pushing them out so people can read them for themselves. Because there might be somebody like me who was just starting out on that journey all those years ago, who's out there now, who's got the same kind of quest for knowledge, and they're not getting it from somewhere else. But if they pick the books up, hopefully that'll address some of the the sort of like the concerns they have about why I'm not reading more.
Love it. All right, we lost DJ. It looks like he is back. DJ, let's do a mic test.
Test. Graeme Rendall.
Hello, sir. How are you doing?
All right, brother. I have to mention Debs is not here today. Her son is having a birthday party that she is planning. And you are one of her absolute favorite, if not her favorite person in this community as a whole. Not only just because you're Graeme Rendall, as a person, but also because you're a researcher and author. So I think you guys share that same passion. And what's funny is, as Nathan was talking, I was trying to think of he used the word curious, and he also he uses that word to describe himself and me. So I was thinking, if there's one thing that the entire community, even when you have these people that are at odds, is curiosity, a thread that runs through everybody. That's maybe the one thing.
Yeah, definitely curiosity, and that's how I started. It was something that a book was given to me, which was intriguing. It just seemed, there must be more to this, and it was obviously something that set me on this path. to where I am now. But yeah, back in the day, there just wasn't enough information, and not, maybe just because people didn't have access to the files that they do now. You know, with the internet now, you can find out so much stuff. But also, a lot of things have been digitized, or if they haven't been, then you can get to them other ways. So it's a lot easier today to be able to write a book like the one I've done than I would have been able to do when I was a teenager, when I was just starting out on that journey. I could never have done this back then. It would have been too difficult to self-publish anyway. You know, you would have to look at Avanti Press, so you'd be paying them money to come out with a limited number of copies of a book, which you would then have to hawk yourself, you know, sort of thing, and that wouldn't get you nowhere. So yeah, it would have been very difficult. Whereas now it's a hell of a lot more easy, and with social media as well, you can get sort of much more known, and the books that you write can be advertised around the world. So yeah, it's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know one thing. I know one archive that Frank really wants to get into, and that's David Marler's Black Triangle. Everything that he's got, right, Franklin?
Yeah, definitely. I'm all about the black triangles. For some reason, are just a particular area of fascination for me. And obviously, with Graeme's black triangular hat earlier on, I do wonder if there'll be any delving into black triangles in any future publications from Graeme, perhaps.
I'm sure there will be. Yeah. Sorry, GJ.
No, that's okay. It just begged a question that I have of Frank. So when you're looking at these black triangles, Frank, when you're thinking about it, and you're thinking about someone's reporting seeing an entire craft, not just even like the wing form, but one that's like a legitimate delta, triangle. What's the first, if you were looking up and seeing that, what's the first question that would come into your mind if you saw one of those at a range where you could work out what exactly what you're looking at?
I don't really know what the first question would be. I suppose you wouldn't know that until one of them appears above your head, and then you're face to face with the thing, and then you have to just see what comes into your head at that moment in time. But I think the thing that always fascinates me about the black triangles is that they're probably, I suppose you could say, the least ambiguous. Like certainly with orb type shapes or lights in the sky and things like that, there is a certain amount of, there's a higher perhaps chance of misidentifications and that kind of thing. And when you're talking about, I mean, this is coming from the point of view of somebody who's never seen what I would consider to be, an anomalous UFO as well, sort of thing. So if I had seen something that did a right angle turns and all the rest of it, that's a bit different. But for me, reports of black triangles, what's particularly interesting is the thing that people see them so close and they see the detail, so close up that for me it's just so unambiguous. And the most compelling reports that I've had about these are that kind of thing, where people are saying it's literally like, between 50 and 100 feet away, and they can make out the detail on the underneath of the craft, and street lights are shining off them and things like that. So yeah, that's what makes it so intriguing for me personally. But I think in terms of the first question, I suppose it's the big one about black triangles for me personally is like, what's the purpose? What are they actually doing? Why are they so close to civilian populations, and why do they have these lights on them, and why are they hovering so low to the ground? You know what I mean? There's a lot of things that don't make sense, and the purpose of what they're actually up to is the biggest question for me. And
the other question is, who's flying them?
Well, yeah,
who's operating them?
Mick asked that in the chat. Mick Ashworth said that. I've probably told you this before, Frank, a long time ago when we first started talking, but my area of New York, the Hudson Valley, you guys all know about the co-authored book by Dr. J. Allen Hynek. You know that Linda Zimmerman has written, I think, 4 books now on Hudson Valley UFOs, and I have, of just my classmates or people that went to my high school the years I was there, I probably have 5, 6 or more, including one of them. Her dad was a police officer. They watched one fly right over. She lives like a couple streets over from the high school. Saw a black triangle fly in daytime, fly right over. And I have multiple classmates that have seen that. That's where the nuclear power plant was at the time. It's shut down now, but I just thought that was interesting. That my town happens to be one where many people have had that very experience you're talking about. But it wasn't cool to talk about it back then, the way it is now. So
that's wild.
Graeme, yeah, I think you think about who's flying it. You know, what is the type of entity that is there actually? Is it a drone type thing? Which it doesn't lend itself to that because of the fact that it's so big. I was thinking that Frank was going to say something along the lines of like how many people are in there. You know, and when I say people, I mean how many beings are in there because. Having a large craft would mean, okay, well, a lot of people can fit in there. Otherwise, you might see the metallic orb that Kirkpatrick was talking about, right?
Well, that's assuming they're human dimensions, though.
Okay, good. Yes. Meaning, you mean if they're bigger, there could be less? Is that what you mean?
It could be, or maybe they're non-corporeal as well. That's
Not,
another thing. So, they don't have a physical form. So, there
Ooh,
might be other ways.
yeah.
That whoever operates them, but also they could be human and they could be sitting like they do somewhere remotely piloting them like they do with today's drones if they're some kind of human tech. I mean, again, nothing's been ruled out yet as to what they are and who operates them. So these are all basically hypotheticals at the moment because we don't have any hard and fast evidence about what they are yet. The
part with the human tech, the problem you get to there is the fact that you don't hear anything.
Oh yeah.
That you don't hear an engine. They don't have any regard for airspace or altitude or things that somebody that was flying a terrestrial aircraft would want to adhere to some of these things. Like you can't fly 500 feet or even below 1,000 feet in a populated area like that. How are you doing it without making any sound and having a huge craft? And then even Frank's talked about in his show, sometimes it's the wide end of the triangle that's facing forward and the points facing aft. So that doesn't jibe with anything that's aerodynamic. So there's no aerodynamics to it at all that would lend itself to creating lift. So one
of your comments in the chat says from We're in a Farm says they've never been seen on the ground. I'm sure David Marler's actually been asked about that before because he's obviously the authority on these things, and I'm sure he said that there weren't any reports of them on the ground either. So again, that's a good point. Are they just airborne all the time? Is it that they're just popping in from another dimension and popping out again, or are they traveling distances or whatever, how they're getting here? Or they're traveling through time, because that's another thing that, especially when you come to orbs as well, people are saying, are they some kind of remote viewing device from the future? So there's all these kind of things that crop up in terms of people's theories, but really theories are like assholes. Everybody's got one.
Yeah, well, those are all those theories are good. Actually, what Christopher Mellon says when people ask him this question is he starts to talk about bedding down a craft. So he's talking about what does it take to bed down an aircraft. First of all, you have to make an approach to somewhere. You have to land to somewhere. There is a giant logistics apparatus to recover, to house, and to maintain that aircraft. And the size of some of these triangles, the size of the hangar, if you've ever seen a blimp hangar before, I've seen them in SoCal, they're absolutely enormous. So you have to have a giant apparatus to be able to not only to bed down the aircraft, to get something big enough to be able to. Hey, Keith Taylor is in the house. He's one of our future guests. I'll tell you guys about Keith Taylor in a second. And then be able to get it inside a hangar so that it's out of sight, it's hidden from satellites and spying eyes and all these. So that's what Christopher Mellon talks about, and I agree because I know that side of it. Before I even was flying, I was aircraft maintenance for 8 years. So you're going to have a giant group of people that's looking after this craft, and that's why that one doesn't have a lot of legs. All those other hypotheses that you just posited to resonate with me, any of them, dimensional, appearing and then disappearing and all these sorts of things.
Well, just the size of them is huge, isn't it? I mean, some of them are reported to be quite small, but I'm sure I've heard them described as the size of football fields, if not bigger. So you'd have to have a huge. Yeah, you would have to have a huge hangar or a kind of a blimp shed, wouldn't you? Like an airship shed to hide these things away in. And they're going to stick out like a sore thumb. So even just the fact that they're being constructed somewhere, unless they're hidden out, in the desert somewhere or wherever. You're not going to be able to construct like something like that in Britain, let's say, because we don't have enough kind of remote land in this country to be able to put one of those kind of things together. And surely people would notice if things like that start springing up in the countryside.
Like the one that Dr. Clark and company and Vinny, like that, like, hey, what the hell is that thing? Anyway, let me turn it over to Money Nathan before I get too far out of hand. But let me just say this. Welcome, Keith Taylor. Keith Taylor is the former NYPD man. He's had so many different roles, including SWAT, but he's a professor at John Jay College in New York City, which is a famous criminal justice university. And I don't know, he has so many accolades, I can't name them all here, but he's going to be coming on with us because he's very interested to get law enforcement / first responders trained on how to react when they get a UFO report. He feels like they're getting called out to these, on these calls, and they don't know what to do when they get there because they haven't been trained. Well, he's got something for that. Anyway, let me turn it over to Money Nathan.
Yeah, it's super important stuff. The other things about the Black Triangle, we talked about, kind of their non-standard characteristics, right? Well, that kind of makes you think of anti-gravitics, where you don't need traditional airfoil design to be aerodynamic. When you introduce something like anti-gravitic technology, I mean, you kind of potentially open up the field to a lot of other speculative avenues, right? So it doesn't necessarily need to be housed in a hangar. Maybe you can, fly it into the ocean. Maybe there's some sort of base down there. There's a lot of ocean, right? So if they can get in and out of these mediums without any sort of disturbance because of that anti-gravitic technology or mass displacement or whatever, and that opens up a whole new, sort of ball game. And we mentioned Terry Lovelace, and that's the only case actually I'm thinking of where he indicates that it did land. I mean, there was that initial sort of, he talks about that kind of like the beam or the laser points that kind of painted their campsite. But then when he was waking up and looked outside of the tent, it seemed as if there were, beings on the ground outside that were entering or exiting the craft itself. So that may be the one incident that I can think of a Black Triangle sighting and potentially being, on the ground. Yeah.
And then all the people inside, which was really scary when he talked about scared children. I think that chilled all of us.
Sure. And a mixture of people, right? He mentioned seeing what appeared to be military personnel, human beings, in addition to non-human beings. So some sort of collaborative effort between humans and other entities. So a lot of speculation there, of course. Speaking of speculation, I wanted to get, Graeme, we're going to talk about a lot of things on the show. It's going to bounce around different things. But since it's so fresh, I wanted to get your take on the NASA UAP panel and briefing that happened this week. As a historian, when you hear things like Sean Kirkpatrick saying about these orbs, these metallic spheres being sighted all around the world, I'm sure you're going, yeah, let me tell you more about that. So what can you tell us about those kinds of sightings in the historical record? How far back did they go?
Well, let's just preface that by saying that, having NASA briefings like that, even if it was just some kind of preamble to a briefing or preamble to a study, is nothing short of miraculous, because you wouldn't have, if anybody had said 10, 20, 30 years ago that we were going to have this kind of thing with, NASA scientists and other specialists and people from, connected with or part of the DoD on a public forum like that and being televised live and news channels around the world picking it all up, you would think we were nuts because you just wouldn't have predicted that. Then again, you wouldn't have predicted 2017 either. So, but it's amazing from a historical point of view as to what hasn't happened and what is happening now. So let's get that out of the way to start with. And in terms of orbs, there's been some discussion on UFO Twitter this morning about the 1944 sightings, and Marek von Renkamp had posted the copy of the newspaper article talking about silver translucent spheres. Now that did actually appear in an American newspaper. It was talking about certain sightings that were alleged to have happened in Western Europe in 1944, and that US Air Force crews were seeing certain things. Now, those spheres were seen in the daytime The things that were seen at night around about the same time, and actually a lot earlier, if you read the Foo Fighters book that I wrote, UFOs Before Roswell, it comes clear that this kind of thing, in terms of lights in the sky that followed aircraft or were just seen, happened a long time, much earlier than sort of November 1944, when what people term Foo Fighters started as a phenomenon. You can trace some of the sightings which are in detail back as early as, say, August 1942 in terms of the RAF sightings. But actually, there are hints and then more definite information in terms of intelligence files that I've looked at, which hopefully I'm going to write a sequel to that book at some stage or publish it, which go back to March 1940. There are intelligence documents which talk about strange lights following airplanes, following our bombers over Germany for distances up to 250 miles in some instances. So, there's things going on back then that people, should maybe think, well, look, this has gone a lot further back than, the kind of established wisdom, if you like. And I'm still trying to get my head around a lot of the stuff and what it implies. It's not a case of these are German night fighters, because actually March 1940 was before the first German night fighter unit was set up during the Second World War. So it's not as if these are, sort of aircraft chasing after the bombers, but for some reason not shooting them down. So Nathan, a long-winded answer to your question there, it goes a lot further back. And from a historian's point of view, there's stuff that simply hasn't, seen the light of day yet. And I'm probably one of the few people who's actually going through this information to try and sort out, what it actually means. And I'm still not entirely sure either at this stage. I don't have a kind of handle on what the Foo Fighters were or the things, that happened before that. I use that term to cover the whole of World War II. But no, it's a real mystery. And how they fit in with later sightings, so Kenneth Arnold and the stuff that comes afterwards. Again, I'm in the dark as well.
You know what's very interesting about this, Graeme, is that the thoughts of those men that were flying those craft in 42 when they were seeing these and looking at it and being as perplexed and amazed and wanting of an understanding of what this is that's flying near them. Is there in some something that's spitting oil out of a piston pushing B-25 or something, right? And today somebody either Ryan Graves had the exact same question decades later, and even someone who's flying a 5th gen F-35 that's encountering these has the exact same question, and they're not a whole lot closer to an answer. They're just like, Intel's telling us they don't know what these things are.
That's true.
No
and some of these crewmen were interviewed, years after the event. You're talking about the 1980s when they were still alive, and they were no further forward as to what they were. And really, some of the sightings. Reports had actually gone up the food chain in terms of the ladder to various staffs and intelligence agencies. But then they'd heard nothing, back, because obviously that's not the way it works. You send information up. You probably know this as well as anybody, DJ. You send information up the food chain in the military, but it never comes back down to you as to what the answers are. So you can understand why they never heard anything back. But in post-war years as well, they may have thought, well, we might get the answers at some stage, and yet there were 40 years on, kind of thing, and people were still asking the same questions, albeit about different things, because obviously time had moved on and the objects had changed. So it wasn't like lights in the sky anymore, and it wasn't sort of silver balls. It was disc-shaped objects. Cigar-shaped objects, what we probably call Tic Tacs nowadays. That was the name back then. That was the name I remember from reading books in the 70s, was cigar-shaped objects. And that probably means torpedo-shaped as well, because things that were classed as torpedo-shaped were seen during World War II. They're actually in the intelligence reports. So again, you've got this, what goes around comes around. The things that were seen then, they might be slightly different in terms of terminology and maybe even the way they operate, but it's still the same shapes that keep cropping up.
Well, and two things before I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Just one last thing. Sorry, it just popped in my head. If you delve deeper in the reports, and there must be thousands of squadron reports that I still haven't looked at yet, and maybe ones that just never got reported. I guess if you could get a hold of all that information and see what the kind of the major types were, I bet we'd find more. Kind of these torpedoes, would find more of these orbs, these translucent silver spheres, and no doubt we'd probably find some more triangles as well. because that one report in January 44, I don't think that must be in isolation. There must be others.
Ooh, I like that. There's more out there in terms of the types of craft. Well, two things that made me think when you were speaking. One is that one of the reasons that information, reported intel goes up and doesn't come back with answers is because, as Jim Semivan says, they don't have the answers. They don't have an answer to it. And the other thing, Smethers is in the house. Good morning, Smethers. And the other one, and what Nathan would say is that in the arc of time, is so that we're basically the amount of time between World War II and now in the arc of time is like the same grain of sand.
Oh, yeah.
So we haven't, we think of it as a long time ago, but in the arc of time, it's really nothing.
And really, lights in the sky following aircraft, that continued. That happened in the Korean War. It happened, afterwards as well. Your correspondent there, we were in a farm. He mentions about the Australian case of a Foo Fighter in the 1950s. It's actually a chapter in this book. It's the one where I call it Wingtip Wingman, and it was a Royal Australian Navy pilot who went on to be a fairly high kind of ranking official, I think he was an attaché or something like that. I can't remember exactly now. But that could have been a Foo Fighter case if that had happened in World War II, because of how it transpired. And there are other cases in the 50s and 60s where airliners were, either pursued or had lights parallel to their wingtips and all the rest of it. So, and if those had happened during World War II, they would have been Foo Fighter cases as well.
And thank you for that contribution. We're on a farm. So let's just to shift over to Frank. I'd like to get Frank to just give his take on the hearings, because as he likes to say, he let it stew for a little bit. He's let it marinate. Now he's ready to throw it on the grill. And then after that, I'm sure Frank, you'll have a question for Graeme.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. And yeah, I'm still letting it stew, to be honest with you. This is one that's taken its time to marinate. It's going to be one of those that's for the perfect tenderness. I think it's going to have to sit for a few more days. There's a lot to consider with it. But I think, there's obviously a lot of different opinions about how things are progressing with this NASA study. And I suppose you could say Kirkpatrick's actual leadership of the Arrow office as well. And I think there's some similarities there. Some people are really positive about it, and other people are really critical about the way things are playing out. And as usual with these things, I think, the truth probably somewhere in between. There's always going to be sort of extremes of thought in either direction. My initial thing with the NASA presentations and whatnot the other day was to see on BBC News not only a story about this, taking it relatively seriously, but an actual breaking news page with live updates throughout the day. I've never seen that before for a UFO related story that's come out through the BBC for as long as I can remember. So that has got to be good. And the discussion was no X-Files music in sight or anything like that. It was just like, this is what is being said, and these are the people who are saying it, and that's really good to see. But having said all of that, I do really understand people's frustration with both of those, which I think are sort of similar in the way that people are getting frustrated with them, which is the NASA investigations and also the way that Arrow is being run. I was talking to Dave about this quite a bit over the last week, and I came up with this analogy of somebody sat on a filing cabinet full of very important information, and the public wanting answers about that very topic, and they go, okay, yeah, we'll commit to finding where this information is being kept. And really, to a lot of people from the outside, it's glaringly obvious that it's in the drawers right underneath where you're sat at this very moment, and it does feel like that. I mean, since I've been looking into the UFO topic, relative newcomer compared to many people, have been looking into this pretty deeply for a few years now, but it becomes quite clear that the best places to look, if you had access to anything you wanted and you wanted the best information to get to the bottom of this topic, you would go to probably two places: the US government military IC databases that have got all the sensor systems feeding into it and all the rest of it from over the last however many years, and NASA, and these are the very two places that these two efforts that I've been talking about are based. So you can sort of understand the frustration there that things are playing out very, very slowly, and it's all kind of, trickle down effect kind of thing as we're going along. But yeah, what do you reckon about that, Graeme? Where do you sit on how all this is playing out? Do you think it's are you positive about it? What do you reckon?
I'm positive that it's actually more than we had 10 years ago and further back. So that's a start. And I guess you're not going to expect that everything's just going to get put out there and go, right, yeah, we don't know what's going on. It would be nice if they did show some truly anomalous footage rather than three lights equidistant from each other and then say, oh, these are commercial aircraft. Was it me, or was it like very strange that it looked exactly the same distance from each other, the one in the middle? That it was one of these kind of low-hanging fruit things. I think that you pick something that can be written off quite easily, whether it's true or not, to what they say about what it was. And then that just kind of sows doubt in people's heads, because then that's a job done. They don't have to come out and say, look, this is definitely not something. All they've got to do is just cast enough doubt. And then that basically tinges everything else that they talk about. So it's quite surreptitious in the way they come out with this kind of thing. And that's me being cynical, because then they go on to then dismiss one of the kind of the groundbreaking, 3 videos that came out in December 2017, the Go Fast, and then they're suggesting it's not go fast, it's go slow, because they reckon it's only doing 40 miles an hour. Now, I'm not entirely sure of the maths of it, because I'm no maths wizard, and I haven't been able to kind of check the figures. And I'm going from what other people say on this as well, that it's not necessarily the case that was the figure, and that maybe assume a certain set of variables which may or may not be true. Again, I'm not entirely sure about that. I'm not an expert, but the one that they should show is gimbal, because gimbal it's one of those that certainly made me sit up and take notice. Why doesn't it make them do the same? Why aren't they putting that up and saying, okay, we don't know what this is? It might have a purely sort of mundane explanation, and there may be some truth behind what other people are saying that it is. I don't necessarily believe that myself, but you can't rule it out 100%. But at the same time, it just looks so strange in the way it flies and the way it turns. And when you hear the audio track about it going against the wind and all this kind of stuff, that it's the most anomalous of the recent footage, as far as I'm concerned. And therefore, why shouldn't it be put up front and center in a huge presentation like that, where there's a lot riding on it, for them just to own up and say, we don't know what this is? Because that would go a long way to actually address a lot of people's concerns that NASA and everybody else by extension aren't necessarily 100% behind what they're doing. Is this just a kind of a kind of lip service to people's concerns and fears and quests for the truth and all the rest of it? So is it a case of they dredge some footage out where maybe not many people have seen it before? It's fairly easily explainable, but they can present it as sort of something which is a bit of a mystery, and then say, oh, well, this is really what it is. And everybody goes, well, oh, okay, just nods their head. And then they will use that kind of knowledge will then tinge everything else they come out with afterwards. Because if that's written off nice and easily, then pretty much everybody else could be as well, because that's how people think. So, we're not talking about people who inhabit UFO Twitter here. We're talking about general public watching this presentation. So, you can see how it's dressed up. And then you get a lot of people coming on, and they've got quite nice titles, and they're obviously quite authoritative, and people have got a lot of respect, probably in the scientific community. So yeah, people are going to listen to what they say. Now, does that mean to say they're experts in UFOs? Well, no, because nobody's an expert in UFOs. But they do just show this stuff that is easily explainable, but they don't show the stuff that is truly remarkable. And I think they'll be much better served every time they have one of these. It's just putting gimbal up every time and saying, do we know what this is yet? And if they don't, then go away and come back again. And the next time they put one of these up, put it up again and say, do we know what this is yet? And that would, I think, in my eyes, would give them a lot more credence, because they would be looking at something truly, abnormal.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a worrying sign for anybody who's interested in this topic and really wants answers as well, when the majority of clips that are shown seem to be selected because they have mundane explanations. Like these efforts are underway because of the clear public interest in this topic. I mean, if you look at like Joe Rogan's interviews with various UFO related people and the movies that come out, there's clearly a massive audience for this because people are really interested in it. So then why, if that's clear and that is driving these efforts at the moment that are going on, whether it be NASA or Arrow, whatever it might be, why then would you choose the most mundane videos you can find to show? Because there are ones like Graeme said, Gimbal, even presenting the Nimitz case that are clearly already publicly available. There's nothing classified there. They're already on the internet. Why not talk about those and point towards them as being a clear example of why we should be taking this seriously? But the ones that ended up getting trotted out are the boring ones that could have other explanations. And there's even a question there, I suppose, as to have they been selected because they have mundane explanations and they want people to get all excited about it, and then a couple of months down the line they can reveal the prosaic explanation. But it also made me think as well, and this is what I was wanting to ask you, Graeme, as well, with your historian's knowledge of the UFO topic. I pulled this quote up just to make sure I got it right. Major General John A. Sanford in 1952 said, quote, "There have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things. It is this group of observations that we are now attempting to resolve," unquote. Obviously a well-known kind of quote all the way from back in 1952. And then Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, 2023, quote, "Only a very small percentage of UAP reports display signatures that could be reasonably described as anomalous. For the few objects that do demonstrate potentially anomalous characteristics, Arrow is approaching these cases with the highest level of objectivity and analytic rigor," unquote. Very similar, even though they're worded slightly differently. They're basically getting at the same point. There's a small percentage that are really interesting and we're looking into it, but, these are, how many years is that? Like 70 years apart?
I think there's something they're not saying, though, to add to those quotes, because if you look at the Blue Book Special Report number 14, which came along in 1955, it was released, and I'm building up to it in Intercept and Identify. They did the same kind of thing where they said, look, we can explain a vast majority of all these cases to a certain degree. But the thing what they did say in that report was, we can probably explain the others, the unknown, if we had more information. And that'll be the bit that they're not saying here. It's because, that's what they're looking for. And you can see that, Arrow and everybody who's gone before them, they are to a point confused about the sightings that don't make any sense. But there'll be this kind of, sort of background of, if we only had more information, we'd be able to say what these were as well. And that's what we obviously think as well, but we're looking at it from a different point of view, where we think that there might be something else to it. But from the scientist's point of view, if they've got an unknown, that all they want to do is narrow it down to something, because it just means that they haven't got enough information to do that. And I think that's the unspoken thing here. I think if you ever pin Arrow down, and maybe some of these other people, the experts, especially those two experts that trotted off for the Congress thing last year, because they had a similar thing where they had all these kind of explainable footage up there, that they showed the so-called two experts. And I think, the kind of like their sort of opinion, I think, might well be, I might not be right here, but I think their opinion is probably, if we had more information, we'd be able to say what these things were as well, and they'd turn out to be mundane. And it's a Robinson panel version 2.0, because their recommendations came along with the same things. All we've got to do is educate the public, show them what they're looking at, show them the misidentifying things that are just ordinary and mundane. So they're seeing aircraft that they're thinking UFOs, or there's something else, etc., etc. The Blue Book Special Report 14 had a similar kind of underlying theme to it, that there was just things that were being seen that were misidentifications, or were just mundane objects anyway. And I'm pretty sure there's a bit of that thinking here as well. Because obviously, do we know what Sean Kirkpatrick's feelings are about UFOs? Has he ever said anything about them before he was picked for this? Do we know what his kind of his history is in terms of with the phenomenon? Has he had any public stance on it beforehand? When scientists that would get interviewed in the 70s and 80s about this kind of thing, or people who spoke on the space topics, such as Sir Patrick Moore in Britain, who used to host the Sky at Night. When they were asked about this kind of thing, they would say, "Oh, there's nothing to it. It's just people misidentifying things. Yes, space is advanced. There could be other civilizations out there, but they've never visited here." So you've got to get past all that before you get to people who have a truly open mind. I might be entirely wrong. It could be something that they do have open minds, that they are willing to entertain all kinds of suggestions. But I just have this sneaking suspicion that really, when it comes down to it, they're just looking for more information that when they get it, will say these things are just, misidentifications of ordinary objects.
They haven't built up the trust with you. You don't have that trust.
But I'm naturally suspicious anyway, mind, DJ.
Yeah, it's totally understandable. I mean, everything that they've done is consistent with, hey, don't trust them, because even if they did get answers, they're going to house that information, silo it, and you won't get it. What I would say, though, in sort of answer to, I've had this conversation with Frank and maybe with Nathan, but I've said rhetorically, how many hours do you think they spent going over videos and selecting very specific videos for each one of these engagements with the public? I could guarantee you they've probably had hours of meetings about this and probably went over, a couple of dozen different ones. And the reason that they've chosen the ones they have are very specific. So in order to understand why they chose them, you have to leave your perspective and go to their perspective and say, my objective as DJ or Graeme or Nathan or Frank is that I want to understand what's going on, and I want a clear picture of the best stuff that we're looking at visually that they've captured, so I can get a sense of what this craft is and what its capability is. Their objective is not that. For our purpose, their objective is to give you just enough to say that we're showing good faith on this topic, but we're going to give you something that's ambiguous and refutable. If you look at them, they chose what I think is one of the most amazing videos I've ever seen in this topic is the Jeremy Corbell pyramid video. Not triangle, but pyramid video. And they know that has been widely disputed, debunked, not believed, and that if you were to take the whole of the UFO community, you would be at least 3/4 on the side that says, this is nothing. It's to do with the aperture of the device they were looking it through, et cetera, or the camera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they picked that one. They picked the one where they kept having to ask. I can't remember during the hearings. Hey, can you rewind? Let me see that again. It's going past the cockpit too quickly. Can't see anything. So everyone. Then the one this time with those three objects. It's like, wait, what are they doing here? I don't even know what I'm looking at. So all of those were chosen. The only one that was decent was the one that you talked about with the metallic orb, which is really interesting because it was picked up on radar. And it means when he says metallic, it's picked up on radar. That's good, because sometimes what if it's just an orb of light, but a radar sweep is not able to capture that? So you have some corroborative sensor data there in terms of radar. So their objective is not to give you exactly what would make all of us look at it and say, oh, that's clearly an anomalous craft that's doing something that we don't see airplanes do. So, man, this is like, and the government's giving it to me, so I know it's legit. That's not their objective. Their objective is to give you just enough to keep good faith, and slowly, Nathan talked about this on Liminal Frames for those of you who want to go back and listen to he and Exo. They're going to slowly drip this out until more and more people are talking about it at the water cooler, etc. So anyway, that's what they're trying to do, which is different than what we want. So we're misaligned in what our goals are. So anyway, I just want to throw this out there. We got about 10 minutes left, 12 minutes left. So if I want to go around the horn with anything that people want the group to consider, et cetera, starting with the money man.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I mean, okay. So I know we're going to go around the horn. I want to give some brief thoughts on just what we talked about with the NASA thing, and because I know it's such a hot topic. I like it. I think it's good. I think we need dry, boring, rigorous science to be taking this seriously. And as much as those of us in the community that, we can bemoan this and hate that it's not going as fast as we might like, we need those serious academics to enter into the conversation, and they're only going to enter into the conversation if they can do it in this very methodical, slow, bore you to sleep process, because that's how they approach science generally, and in this topic in particular has such a stigma on it. They talked about stigma at the beginning of the entire panel. Their entire careers or their disciplines have a tremendous amount of stigma, even preventing them from taking it seriously. So the fact that they're there, the fact that they're willing to look at this and not play the X-Files music, and I'm sure some of them are having the snicker factor about it, even if they aren't saying that publicly, they still privately think, oh my gosh, I have to look at this stupid UFO stuff. All that said, is the benefit of it, I think, is that by approaching it from that very staid, banal sort of perspective, eventually they're confronted with something that they cannot ignore, they cannot write off anymore. So if they've applied every degree of scientific rigor toward an anomalous event, as Kirkpatrick alluded to, that very small percentage of events that have good data and are seemingly performing in anomalous ways, those are the cases that you cannot ignore. And that's what we would want as the public. We would want them to be able to say, yeah, we've ruled out all this stuff. We've done every single thing you can possibly imagine to discount and write off whatever this encounter happens to be. And we still have no idea how it's doing what it is doing. And then that tells you, that gives the public a sense of, well, geez, like it's past every single scientific, process that we can throw at it. Therefore, it must be something that we just do not understand. And then that leads to a whole host of other questions which follow. The other thing I will say is I think it's really timely that we have this NASA panel stood up, that we have this very public-facing effort underway. That's what we would want to be in place before other bigger kinds of revelations might be coming, right? And here I'm just talking about the thing that Chris Mellon said in Politico, that he's had very credible witnesses on the inside who he has referred to Congress, who he has referred to Arrow, who have indicated to him they have been working on crash retrieval and reverse engineering projects. So what happens if we get more and more announcements like that, not just from the partisans like Chris Mellon or Lou Elizondo, the people who've always been beating this drum forever, but from other names? What happens if we have that, and then the public's like, oh crap, I hope we have some smart people who are already thinking about this. Well, it turns out we do. We have a whole panel of smart people from NASA, an organization with an incredible reputation, not just in the United States, but around the world. We've got a panel of experts, and fortunately, they're here to take a look at this and to take it very seriously. You would want that in place, as opposed to being, hey, here's a massive revelation from some credible, nonpartisan people, and then everybody being flat-footed, being like, oh, crap, we don't have anybody dedicated to this. I guess we're really behind the eight ball here. Well, no, we do. So the pieces are moving. The pieces on the chessboard are moving, and they're in place. And I think that's what we want to see. It is glacially slow, and it's annoying. I know for all of us who've been, fans of this topic forever, but I would argue it has to roll out in this way for the world to take it seriously, for the world to be prepared for something as big of an announcement as what those of us on the inside, or who have been fans of this topic forever, what we think is going to happen here.
I just want to say I couldn't agree more. I think that, well, it's frustrating to agree with that position, but yes. So Frank, take it away on that topic, and then it'll go to Graeme.
Yeah, I'll try and keep this relatively brief, because I could probably go off on one in a few different directions here.
Yes.
But I think, my thinking with it, again, going back to that kind of frustration with the processes and things like that, I do agree, Nathan, with what you're saying, that it is definitely good to have this kind of, very dry kind of scientific process there and all the rest of it. And the knock-on effect and the way that ripples out into, the wider world as well, it definitely has, a positive impact in terms of, spreading the word about the topic and things like that. And and all the rest of it. But I think, again, going back to the frustrations thing, is that we already kind of have those cases, or that case, in my opinion, which is the Nimitz case. In terms of it's got pretty much everything that you could want. And if you were going to do a rigorous scientific investigation into this topic, the first thing you would do is go after the best case that's got all of the data there. And as Scott Bray said in the congressional hearing, they have actually reviewed, or at least Scott Bray did with the UAP task force. It's not clear how much of that was passed across to Sean Kirkpatrick in his office, but Scott Bray did say that they'd reviewed the classified data as well as the publicly available data and all the witness testimony, and that case was still unidentified and considered to be anomalous. And if I was doing a scientific investigation, I'd just go there. I mean, we say it a lot, don't we? You only need one case to be truly anomalous in order to make a case for it, And for me, that's the case, and that's where I would like, hear about Kirkpatrick with Arrow and everything like that, and not having the accesses that they need to get to the IC's best sensor systems and all the rest of it. Let's just do that. Forget about all the rest of it. Let's just go for that case and find that data. And even if you can't reveal to the public, what the data consists of, even if you can just say very, very clearly, we've looked at this data and it's unambiguously something really anomalous and so on. Let's get the best and brightest in to analyze the data. That's what I would like to see. Anyway, I think I'll leave it there. Otherwise, I'll go on and on.
Thank you. My frustration is probably the lack of a Chris Mellon, a Lou Elizondo, a Ryan Graves from Britain. That we don't have people like that who have been close to what's been going on, what's truly been going on, in terms of proper kind of investigations, not necessarily somebody in an office somewhere, but actually somebody doing physical and in the field investigations into what's been happening. And we don't have that here. We have people who have been on the edge of this. So we've had people who have worked a desk in Whitehall and taken telephone calls and have passed on messages to other agencies who have very strange designations and to all intents and purposes are so secret that you can't get any information out of them. You can't get freedom of information requests to find out what they've done and what they've published and all the rest of it. So yeah, it's a complete enigma. And the information that does come out, we can't really make much sense of it. So we've got a whole lot of stuff in this country, in the UK, that we're still trying to sift through. We have cases here which are completely, ambiguous, such as the Calvin case. So, Frank Blair's talking about the Nimitz encounters from November 2004. We have a case from August 1990 that we're still figuring out, trying to figure out what it was and what it was doing in the middle of Scotland. One August evening in 1990. There's a photograph now which has appeared, the actual true photograph rather than an artist reconstruction. And actually the two are fairly similar, although the backgrounds are different rather. But, again, what was that? That's something else truly, kind of mysterious that nobody really knows what it was either. So we've got a lot of things which are very, very strange in this country, but we don't have the same level of, I guess, people who were so close to it that we can call upon, not that they can get information because of NDAs and things like that, but we don't have people who have an inkling or some first-hand knowledge of what's been going on behind the scenes. And I wish we did.
Graeme, it's a reflection of the difference in our society and our culture. America, the child of original child of Britain. It's a very combative society. It's a society that's very rebellious, and you can see with what Lou did and what Christopher did and what some of these guys did is they said, Lou said, "Screw this! I'm giving up my job over this." I mean, so and plus the art of secrecy is something that we learned from the British, and you guys are still the masters of it. And so people don't want to come out, and there are people there, but they have made the decision that they're going to allow the U.S. to lead the way on this for whatever their reasons are. They're not, I've said before, nobody's preventing anybody in the British hierarchy from talking about this. That's their decision for whatever discussions they've had. And we could say, we asked Baptiste about this. We asked him, why aren't the French? He said, do we have a program? He said, yeah, France has a program. We have information. I believe that they're happy to let the U.S. and I think Baptiste knows what the hell he's talking about, given the positions that he holds. And he says they're happy to let the U.S. lead the way on this topic and not talk about it. We could say the same of Spain. We could say the same, obviously, of the Italians, given what Lou told us. The Russians, we could say the Chinese. So we could say any number of countries have decided that it's not in their interest to reveal this information for whatever that reason is. I don't know because I'm not part of their culture. But the U.S., this combative, violent, rebellious group that we are, we've decided we're not going to take it anymore, and now here we are. So we're a little bit ahead on it in terms of it. But yeah, it would be great if other countries would say we're going to well, that would answer, a lot of questions. But a lot of countries just, for whatever their reasons are, don't want to. I don't think the U.S. is forcing them. I think they have agency to do what they want to do, but they've decided it's not in their interest to do so. And they're in unison, by the way. It's not, there's no rogue country except us. So anyway, let's go with Nathan. Did you remind me of where we're at? Or
I'm
does,
good.
I think
We pass it to Frank. Yeah.
Frank. Yeah. Do you have anything you want us to consider, Frank? Other than just my lack of facial hair? Oh.
Nope.
You're on mute, mate.
Oh, there we go. Schoolboy error. Had to happen once, didn't it? But yeah, no, nothing in particular, really. I think it's quite an interesting discussion going on in the wider community, the UFO community, that is, at the moment, as to, something's coming. This is something that everybody's discussing, but there's not actually a very clear indication of exactly what that's going to be. And, there's so many different trains of thought on this. And Nathan, you'd mentioned just earlier on about having things like this NASA investigation and the Arrow office and bodies of officials and whatnot, and scientists and academics and things being engaged with the topic, and that will be good to have in place if some kind of revelation is presented to the public across the world. I suppose I'd like to ask you, if you've got any thoughts on where that revelation is going to come from. Do you tend to think that it's more like an insider that's going to come out from a whistleblower point of view? Are we going to see some kind of direct revelation from whatever others might be visiting the planet, or is it going to be like an official at a podium? What do you think?
Yeah, good question. I think it's going to come from a variety of places, some of which are familiar to us. Chris Mellon, I gave that example. That's one that, Chris is always out there trying to move the ball downfield, and I appreciate his efforts in that regard, not letting us forget about what is happening. And because of his connections and his high profile, he's able to to disseminate information and be taken more seriously than some others. So there'll be, I think, we'll hear from voices like Chris, who have been, champions of this. I mean, Gary Nolan too is a recent example, who's been very vocal. But we're going to need more than that, and I think that we will. I mean, ultimately, that's exactly what we have to have, right? We have to have the new voices who both are from the inside. So some voices from the inside who we haven't heard from, but also some voices who are basically new to the topic or relatively new, but who have authority, right? So we need some voices like that who are saying to us, you know what, I didn't think this was a thing, but I've looked at this evidence now, and because of my position, you can hear from them and go, geez, well, if they think there's a there, there really must be a there, right? So that's the kind of thing that we need to have. Now, in terms of what we might hear from whatever this is, from the others, the other intelligences, whatever, I think, and I've argued a lot about this, or put forth some thoughts about this on Liminal Frames quite a bit. I think that we have to start getting a lot more comfortable with the understanding that non-human intelligence is radically different than anything we might understand it to be. Like we might have some proximate understanding of what a non-human intelligence, totally different evolutionary line of thought might look like. But we really have there's no parallel. There's nothing we can be like, oh well, they should have they should make a statement like at a podium, and like in Mars Attacks or something. Like these are such like anthropomorphic ways of looking at it. I just don't think we're going to get that. I think that it's very likely that non-human intelligence looks at reality in a way that we don't fully understand, that they interact with us in ways that we don't fully understand, and as a result, the making of themselves known to us is not going to happen in the way we might want it to, in the way that we have fictionalized that over so many years in our movies and everything. I just don't know that it's going to unfold in that manner, and that makes it very challenging, right? It makes it very challenging to explain, to understand, to create new meaning and narrative out of it, and so there'll be a lot of work to do. But we've heard from those who are experiencers, who are also telling us that because of the way that these beings interact, there's a kind of information transfer that happens at a deep conscious level, a level that we're not accustomed to receiving information from, at least explicitly, although we all talk about things like inspiration and intuition. I don't know where that came from. So we have a kind of corollary there. But if they're going to be able to interact with us at that level, that deep level of awareness, not just through this verbal or nonverbal communication, then it's going to be an entirely different kind of ball game. I don't know that it's going to happen just with a flip of a switch. I think it's going to be a continual sort of unfolding as we kind of a dawning of a new world, essentially, and that process is slow.
I guess you could be looking at multiple NHIs as well. It might not just be one. So some of them, we could be lab rats. And for others, any kind of contact could be incidental. And they might not even know they're doing it. It could be like the Strugatsky brothers. They're Russian science fiction authors from the 60s or 70s. They wrote a book called Roadside Picnic, which other people might know as a film by Andrei Tarkovsky called Stalker, where there's a load of people. There's basically alien rubbish left on Earth, and it's very dangerous. And people's interaction with it, but it's just a case of maybe this is just someone's stopping off place that they come and have a picnic, and their interaction with us is purely incidental. It's just something that happens and they're not even aware of it. It's just like do you talk to an ant when you see it walk over the side over the sidewalk? You don't stop to have a conversation with it. Why do we think, why are we so kind of arrogant that we think that some advanced technology or race might want to speak to us? What have we got to offer them? So there's a whole lot of things like that going on as well. Arthur C. Clarke's quote, I'm probably paraphrasing it here, but is something about along the lines of they're not only we cannot imagine, it's just we're incapable of imagining what they are and what their motives are and what they're doing here.
I have one answer to that though, Graeme. What you said about the ant hypothesis. The reason that we would think that they want to communicate with us is because there are lots of people that everybody here knows that are saying they are communicating with us. So that's the reason why I would think that. Yeah. If they said we're having no communication at all, but there's all these people that are from Christopher Bledsoe to EXO to Jake King. I mean, we could name off tons of people that we all know that say that
that's
they're
true.
Receiving. So,
but not everybody who has kind of encounters with these things or with strange objects has that level of communication.
True.
So that could be just one small part of it. That's what I'm saying about multiple. There could be multiple kind of actors here. It's not necessarily just one.
Well, let's not forget too that we communicate all the time, but we don't understand. So how many times have you had a conversation with your partner and you're like, yeah, we're on the same page there, and then like you find out like, oh, we weren't really on the same page, and even though we had a whole conversation about it, I came away with this understanding and they thought something entirely different. And that's just human beings, right? So imagine what we're dealing with here if we're not talking about human interaction.
That's a great point. Yeah, because if we're fallible in that way, imagine when we're dealing with something of a higher intelligence and we're trying to interpret what they're telling us, and I think even Nathan would probably agree, perhaps there's a certain amount of desire to what you want to take and extract from that how that you're putting into how you interpreted that communication. There could be some of that in each of those samples as well. So it is that's a whole show that we could go on that. In answer to Frank's question, though, I think everybody on the panel here, Frank, is saying to us that whistleblowers is going to be that next egg to break that may provide something. So the answer is I don't know. That's my answer. But the people that so me, DJ, I don't know. But people that I've spoken with, and I think again everybody in the panel has heard from different people that know things, that it's probably going to be whistleblowers that'll be that next step forward. Christopher Mellon, when Nathan was talking about that, I was sort of looking at, like a running back. You have these running backs that'll run to the outside and then look for a hole and sprint upfield. And Christopher Mellon is like this fullback that just kind of takes a handoff from the quarterback, and he runs a dive play going straight over, just nailing the linebacker, and the other linebacker, now safety, has to take him down, but he's had 8 yards, with each carry. So it's almost a first down each time.
Yeah,
So,
definitely. I think, an interesting point about Chris Mellon's article as well, and it's always one why I like to have a think about things before I present my take on the pod, like you mentioned earlier. Part of that is to see if Chris Mellon's going to do an article, because he tends to have them locked and loaded, doesn't he, ready to go whenever there's a big development. And I thought very interestingly in that particular article was that he mentioned that he's referred and he spoke to various whistleblowers about crash retrievals and whatnot. But very interestingly, he also said after that, rightly or wrongly, there were several others more directly involved that didn't want to go to Arrow because of concerns over Arrow's leadership. So that sort of, it is what it is. But it would suggest to me that, there's perhaps not a lot of faith there from those who've got the most significant direct involvement with these alleged reverse engineering programs. There's not a lot of faith that they're going to actually have their stories taken seriously, or perhaps there's concerns around the actual secure system that's supposed to be set up for them to come forward and that kind of thing, and that they're actually probably not going to go to Arrow, at least for the moment. So I would suggest that whistleblowers is more likely to be the thing. I'd been joking on my pod that if there's a government official stands up on a podium, I will eat a raw mushroom live on camera. That's if it's this year, by the way. And I'm not a big fan of raw mushrooms at all, so hence why I would do that. But I think there's very, very little chance of a government official coming out saying anything. I think most likely the achingly slow pace of things with Arrow and these other efforts is probably going to, if anything, push people who perhaps were considering coming forward via official channels to do it off their own back, perhaps go into a big media publication or something like that. I think the likelihood of us seeing that this year pretty high, but I don't think we're going to get it from any officials personally. But we'll see, eh?
Yeah, I have to agree with you. And then, not to throw this hand grenade in the room, but the Lou Elizondo saying come back in 5 years in 2022, and then John Ramirez talking about 2027 and all that. So, I mean, it's an interesting that they've thrown that out there. I don't know if anybody has any quick takes on that, and then we'll start to go with Cabby goodbyes.
I'll put you up
Anything
there,
on
Graham. Putting you on the spot,
2027,
Graham.
No, I'm afraid I have no opinion one way or another. I don't know enough about, I don't have any kind of particular insight into what they're speaking about. So I can't tell whether the dates they're being bandied about, how relevant they are. And now that there's two different or multiple dates out there, then who knows? The next thing we're going to see is somebody with the end is nigh, kind of sandwich board. That'll be the.
Well,
Yeah.
Graham, here's what's interesting about it, though. If you look at two people that represent different sides of the equation, and ironically, one of them really represents both sides, but the nuts and bolts, Graeme Rendall, Frank Jones' side, Lou Elizondo is all over that. He has been a primary source for you and all of us, right? And John Ramirez actually straddles both sides because he's an experiencer, and he's talked about the woo side, about having downloads and communications and interactions. So both of them are setting that approximate date. That's what's interesting, is it's coming from two different people from two different perspectives, but the same time frame, right, Nathan?
Yeah, no, for sure. There's something about predictions, right? I think we kind of hate them in a way. Sorry, myself back there. We hate them and we love them because they're fun, they're titillating, they're exciting, but inevitably in human experience, they often come and go. Every generation they come and go, and we can point to history and be like, yeah, look how they were wrong there. They thought this was going to happen, they were wrong there. So I think we have a valid reason to be skeptical about some of these predictions and claims, and I think we should approach that with a dose of healthy skepticism that will come to pass. Now, that said, I think it's hard to argue that we're not going to be experiencing something pretty bizarre in the next few years, and I'm speaking strictly about things that aren't alien intelligence at all, just where we are in our own technological development and advancement as a species on this planet. We are playing with tools and technology that are almost like rapidly advancing beyond our ability to understand them. Things like we've already cracked the atom, but we're talking about artificial intelligence now and implementing that in ways that are changing the world right now as we speak. And those changes, I believe, are only going to continue to accelerate. Changes to our every facet of our life. How we learn, how we interact, how we do medicine. All these things are going to be impacted by artificial intelligence, and that's a type of foreign intelligence to us that is only proximally understandable. So that to me is basically certain. And then you add on top of that the dramatic changes that are happening to our world with our climate and the heightening tensions that we see with our politics. I mean, all of these things aren't getting better as far as I can tell. I'd like them to. And so I think we are headed for, it seems like we're headed for a precipice of some kind or another. I hope we get past it, right? I hope that we do transition through that, and perhaps we do it with the help of something else. Perhaps we do it with the help of others who have been down that road before, who have learned lessons from their own past and are here to maybe help us transition through these very challenging times. That's the hopeful, optimistic, in a way even romantic inside of me that is looking at these predictions and thinking, there will be the best on the other end. On the other hand, maybe not. Maybe we have a great filter moment that we just don't get past. And I try not to dwell on that because I have kids and, I like the world. So
Nathan offers our best hope. He would have been a great captain of the Battlestar Galactica. This I'm sure.
So say we all.
He could have been a Dama. So let's go with, and we'll go to our cabbie goodbyes with our new cabbie, Frank, and the deliberative process that he goes through and the patience that he shows is one of the reasons why, and his brilliant analysis is one of the reasons why we not only wanted his show on the Cab Network, but we wanted him to be in Cab. So luckily he was amenable to both. So let's go with cabbie goodbyes, Franklin.
Yeah, thanks everybody. I was a bit ranty today. I've ended up going on a couple of tangents there, but it's a brilliant discussion as always. Always a pleasure, Graeme, to speak to you, mate. And look forward to your next book. I've got all of the other ones in the shelf behind me there. With Graeme's been kind enough to actually sign them as well, and we've had the opportunity to have a pint or two here and there over the last couple of years. So I look forward to getting the next one, hopefully. And thanks everyone. It's been a pleasure.
And real quick, Nathan, before you go, Dr. Taylor here, something that we've heard Lou actually the same sentiment that disclosure is not an event, it's a process. Most compelling evidence will not convince those who refuse to believe what they are seeing. So yes, he couldn't be more right about that, Dr. Taylor.
So well said. This has been a great show, and Graeme, always a pleasure to speak with you. I'm going to be seeing you soon in Roswell. I will. So I will bring a copy of your book so that I can get it signed in person. That would be terrific. It's been several months since we've last seen each other, and I look forward to that reunion. and I look forward to what you will be saying there. And I hope those who aren't familiar with your work, who are listening or watching, they seek out your books, they add them to their bookshelf. This is a man who has devoted a lot of time, energy, talent to unearthing the amazing history of anomalous sightings in the world. And you are selling yourself short if you're not reading his content and getting brought up to speed on what all there is to know. If you do, you'll be ahead of the curve. You'll be ahead of everyone else who's new to this topic. So get those books. You can find them on Amazon, and you can find Graeme as well on the podcast sort of circuit. You know, he's around all the time, and he's a wealth of knowledge that you'll want to tune into. So Graeme, again, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, guys. And it's always been a pleasure to meet you all in person, different times, different places, and I look forward to the next time we meet. And yes, Nathan, I will see you at the end of the month.
And it's going to be hard for me to say it any better than Nathan just said it. But I would say if you look at what you're seeing right here, this the positivity and the brotherhood that you see here, this is what you need to look at to the community and say, yes, this is what's here. There's a lot of stupidity that goes on. Well, just don't even take part in it, because there's so much. You make lifelong friends here, and that's what I feel like with these gentlemen you see on the screen here. I have lifelong friends as a result of being involved in this community and this topic, and that's the takeaway. The takeaway is not the idiots out there that are just trying to sort of split everybody apart and discredit people, but see, come to the community, find people that you can really bond with and form a lifelong friendship, because when this show is long gone and it's not a show anymore, I'm still going to have Graeme and Nathan and Frank as my friends, and that's the important part. The shows and the ratings and the clicks and the likes, it's all bullshit. It's not material. It's not an issue. So, Graeme, it is an honor to to know you. As I was just saying there, to be your friend, to watch you work, and to be an example kind of how to be in the community and to contribute to the community. So thank you so much for your friendship and for your work. It's just an honor. Thank you. Okay, sir.
Thank you, DJ. And thank you again for the invitation. It's always a pleasure coming on, speaking to you gentlemen.
Yeah, this door's open. You just gotta be like, yo, I got something I want to talk about. Message any one of us that's on cab, and we'll get you on that calendar. So that's a done deal.
Okay.
So as Julie likes to say, like and subscribe, comment on YouTube. It really does help if you would give us a rating on Apple Podcast or something like that. And really the purpose of those numbers is just that when we're trying to get somebody that is kind of teetered, they don't really know us, so they don't know if they want to come on. Sometimes they'll look at these metrics and decide, okay, I'll come on. It's not, we're not making any money out of it, but it's just a matter of trying to convince people to come and speak with us, like Bono from U2, for example. Frank, maybe you can arrange that, or at least Larry Mullen Jr.
Put in a good word. Yeah.
All right. So for the guest of honor, Graeme Rendall, for our cabbie, Frank, for my co-conspirator, enjoy fun and interesting UFO talk, Nathan, this is DJ. And for Julie in the chat, this is DJ saying peace out, one love. We'll see you down the road. And, we're always wondering what's up around the bend.